I learned how to drive when I was in high school, like a lot of people do. It wasn't until college that I learned how to drive a manual stick transmission. I knew how to operate a car so long as it was an automatic transmission, but I didn't know how to drive stick. And so a friend of mine had offered to teach me, hey, Steve, I'll take you out, I'll show you how to drive stick. You'll figure it out. It's not that hard, they say. You'll get the hang of it. And so we went out onto the roads, and here I am just struggling, trying to figure out how to operate a vehicle with a manual transmission. And I thought that I was doing okay until I heard that familiar chirp and saw those red and blue lights spinning around behind me. Whoop, whoop. And so, can you imagine the officer like, hey, Pastor Steve, because the guy didn't know who I was, but imagine him saying this in the loud, hey, pull over. And so go tell your friends and your family the time when the guest preacher got pulled over by the cops. Just don't tell Pastor Tom. He might not invite me back to speak here anymore. I don't know. When I explained to the officer what was happening, I'm like, look, I really do know how to drive. Here's my license. Okay, I actually do know how to operate a motor vehicle safely. I'm not impaired. I'm not tired. The weather isn't terrible. I'm trying to figure out how to manually shift gears here. And I explained to him what was going on here. He looked at me sternly with crossed arms, shaking his head, and he goes, go do it somewhere else. I got kicked out. The worst part of it was, at that moment when he had caught me, I was in a church parking lot. I got kicked out of church. Now you're in church, so you have to be honest, okay? Have you ever been kicked out of something before? I'm looking around, seeing if anybody brave enough to be like, yeah. I don't know, maybe like kicked out of church if you get the giggles. Am I the only one that's happened to before? You're in worship and you just can't stop laughing. This happened in my family like 2 weeks ago, and I was the one saying, you better cut it out or I'm going to kick you out. Maybe it's not church. Maybe it's like a meal where you get kicked out from the table. Like, you can't stay at the table. You need to go to your room, which I always thought was ironic because my room was the place where all my toys were. Like, yeah, okay, Mom. You want me to go to the place where all my toys are? Woohoo! I don't want green beans anyway. So, or maybe kicked out of a meeting. You got to go. You're out. You have to leave the room. And has that ever happened to you before? Even if it hasn't, I'm sure you can picture it in your mind. Sometimes, to be fair, sometimes we need a little bit of space to settle down and to deal with a problem. Sometimes some separation can be healthy. It can be a good thing. But other times, I think sometimes we use that get out approach when it's really not actually helpful. We just don't want to deal with the problem. We just don't want to deal with the issue, and so the way we respond to it is like, kick a person out, send them away, send the problem away. I'm not going to deal with it right now. You got to go. And thankfully, Jesus had something to say about that. So still in John 6, I'll give you a little hint in advance before we look at it together, if you hadn't guessed already. The thing that Jesus said wasn't, get out! So we're gonna see it together there. And I mentioned that Jesus had this question, the question that he already knew the answer to. He asked, where can we buy food for such a large crowd of people? And Philip, one of his disciples, had said, he had this answer, saying, hey, Jesus, it's going to take more money than we can make in an entire year to pay to cater this party. If we're going to do this, Lord, I want to just make sure that you count the cost up front. And so here Philip is trying to school Jesus about the cost of food, as if Jesus doesn't know this already. It's going to take more than the amount of money we make for a whole year. If we're going to pay to feed everybody, I don't think this is going to work, Lord. And then Andrew speaks up, another disciple, Andrew. And he mentions that there's this boy who has 5 small loaves of bread. I don't know if it's like dinner biscuits or what, but think it's, small rolls or something, 5 small loaves of bread, and a couple of fish. And everybody knew this was obviously not enough food to feed a crowd this size. The disciples suggested that they should send the people away. There's the get out part, okay? In the text in John 6, they're suggesting to Jesus, here's what we think we should do. Don't actually fix the problem of how we can get food to feed the hungry people. No, what you should do is send them off. Send them into town. Send them off to the market. Send them off to the Super Walmart or wherever it is that you shop. Kroger, Meijer, we have all got our favorites, right? Aldi? Any Aldi fans? No? Okay. But send them away. There's one hand, I like Aldi. That's good. I'm glad you can confess that before the Lord and the people of God. That's good. And send them away, Lord. Send them away so that they can get their own food because, look, paying for everybody's food, way too much money. stealing lunch from this one kid. I don't really think it was stealing because, the way that it worked out. But, imagine, grabbing the kid's lunch sack and running away. And this is not going to be enough to feed everybody. So what are we going to do? Well, I can't deal with this problem. The problem is too big for me. I think we should send them away to the nearby farms, to the nearby villages to feed themselves. Kind of like that police officer wanted me to just go somewhere else. Then it feels to me a little bit like perhaps that might have been some of the motivation that the disciples were feeling. But Jesus chose a different response. In John 6, look at verse 10 with me. In John 6, have the people sit down. There was plenty of grass in that place, and they sat down. About 5,000 men were there. He didn't say, get out. What did he say? Sit down. Sit down. If your boss or your parents or your teacher tells you to get out, then you need to listen. You need to do what they say. But in this case, the disciples were not saying, get out because they thought that it was best. I think they were saying get out because they thought that it was easiest. They thought that it was convenient or fastest. But the easy way isn't always the best way, is it? And some of us have learned that lesson the hard way over the years. Jesus didn't say, get out. He said, sit down. Sit down. Do you ever feel like God has sent you away? Do you ever feel like someone in the church has told you, get out? It happens sometimes. Maybe not with those exact words, sometimes with a lack of words, or sometimes with our attitude or our actions or our facial expression. I was quite pleased when I arrived this morning to be greeted by so many smiling people who welcomed me to come into the building. Some people I know, and some people I'm just meeting for the first time. I didn't have a get out, which, that would be weird, right? On a Sunday morning, somebody shows up, we don't know them, we're not going to be like, but, what happens. Sometimes the people of the church take that get out attitude and send it towards others, not because it's what's best, but sometimes we do it just because it's easiest. And then we end up making a mess from it. And if that's happened to you, I am truly sorry. I'm truly sorry that has happened. It happens when it shouldn't. And like the disciples, sometimes we want to send our problems away instead of sitting down with Jesus. Okay, well that's really poetic, but what does it look like? What does that even mean to sit down with Jesus? Because he's not here, he returned to heaven. So it's not like we can all go gather around a table with him the way the disciples did. What does that even look like if we sit down with Jesus? Messy. It looks messy. It gets really messy when we sit down. And in this case, in John 6, that's exactly what he instructed them to do. Don't leave. Don't send the problem away. Let's sit together. So, the next time you find yourself in trouble, whether you see those red and blue lights behind you or whether you just see red eyes of somebody who's frustrated with you, I want you to remember, Jesus doesn't look at you that way. And the next time your eyes start to get red towards somebody, and they're in the wrong and I'm in the right, I want you to remember, Jesus doesn't send us away. He wants us to sit down with him. He doesn't condemn us. He doesn't want to get rid of us or take the easy way out. He wants us to sit with him, to repent, to turn away from our sin, to be friends, to submit, to change, and stick around so that we can be in a good relationship with each other. You've felt it before, same as me, everybody in the room.